Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Studies Circle HISC Seerah session 188. Inshallah, we finished the Battle of Hunayn and the lessons last week. So we did the preparations for Hunayn, the ambush, the tide turning, the victory for the Muslims, and then they moved on to the siege of Taif and then the distribution of the spoils of war. And then the Hawazin returning, having accepted Islam and taking back their women and children. Last week we talked about the lessons we learned from the Battle of Hunayn and the Siege of Taif. And some of them include the similarities between Hunayn and Badr, as both are mentioned by names as battles in the Qur'an. We also talked about how victory comes from Allah, and that is really critical and key, that we do all our efforts and then put our full trust in Allah. That is what Tawakkul Allah is, for His support. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped Muslims in Badr, and He helped them in Hunayn as well. And then never to be too complacent with our material calculations, to think that the efforts, our materialistic efforts that we put in and our wealth in of themselves are enough. Also the fact that Allah is the cause of the causes, the originator of the causes. And so that's, so when we're looking at the shifa, of seeking medicine, that it's Allah who provides the cure, and that may be through the doctor or the medicines, etc. So it's a better understanding of those aspects. And how the Prophet ﷺ, he dealt with Muslims who said things which were clearly shirk or kufr, and some of the new Muslims especially. So there's a difference between performing kufr and saying things with it which are kufr, and believing in the kufr. And it's important for us as Muslims to take away those lessons, that people may say things which are wrong or do things which are wrong, which in of themselves may not take them outside of Islam, or they may take them outside of Islam. So we just need to be careful of those things. And then we talked about the honesty of some of the Sahabi when they're relating stories which are critical of them. And they're not sort of painting a rosy picture. It's not revisionism that you see in a lot of autobiographies nowadays, where people always portray themselves in the best light, and they gloss over the negative things. So you had the Sahabi relating this incident where he asked the Prophet ﷺ to give them a tree like that and what's a superstitious tree, and the Prophet ﷺ getting very animated in his response to the Sahabi, and saying, basically, you're asking what the Bani Israel asked of Musa, and again the Sahabi being comfortable in himself to relate that story verbatim for us to learn. And so the Prophet ﷺ, in that occasion, overlooking the errors of these new Muslims. So again, it's appreciating that everybody is on a different journey in Islam, and people who are younger and more naive in the journey, who have a lot more to learn, need to be treated in a slightly different manner by experienced Muslims than those who are sort of more further along in their journey to Islam. So again, and we're all on the journey to Islam, and it's just recognizing we're on that journey we are, and not to be overcritical of those people who are certainly sort of still on a steep learning curve. And then the Prophet, and one of the other lessons we learned when the Prophet was distributing the ghanima, the war booty, is how he treated people differently, and not just the elite from the Quraysh, the noblemen, just generally the elite from the ordinary person, and also how he recognized that some people are more materialistic. It's human nature, and other people have a tendency to be more religious or to prioritize religious things more. And the Prophet recognized that. So he would give as gifts to the greedy people to bring them and win them over to Islam. And to others, he would give less. And that in of itself would bring them closer to Islam, because he's saying to them, I trust you more, so I don't need to give you more. And that, is something that a lot of those people who got less actually appreciated even more. That it showed for them that the Prophet loved them even more. So again, it's just a really good aspect of leadership and understanding the human psychology that the Prophet demonstrated there. Then we finished off how the Prophet was asked by the Sahabi to make dua against the people of Taif. This was the second time he was given this challenge, the first time by the angels. And on both occasions he made a dua for the people of Taif to bring them closer to Islam. But again, it's an appreciation of the fact that this is permitted. If we have been wronged by, not just by non-Muslims, but by other Muslims, and harmed, in terms of our honor, our reputation, our wealth, or whatever, Allah gives us the ability, the right to make dua specifically against those individuals. So these things are permissible. And the dua of the oppressed and the injured person has no veil between them and Allah. So that dua is closer to Allah, as it were. So again, we finished off there. And I'm sure there were other lessons as well, but as I say, we need to sort of move on. So today's session will be a shorter session, inshallah. I say that a lot of weeks. Just a couple of stories. But it's a bit of a transition between the end of the 8th year of Hijri and the 9th year of Hijrah, which is known as the year of delegations, but also the other significant events that are left. Essentially, we've got the Battle of Tabuk, the year of delegations, and then you've got the final, essentially the final Hajj, and then the last few days. So we're really in the final phases of the Prophet ﷺ's life and his dawah. So just a few things here. One is there's the story of the conversion of someone called Kaab ibn Zuhayr. Now, Kaab ibn Zuhayr, he was the chief poet. Like Al-Walid ibn Mughira, he was renowned amongst the Quraysh as being the best poet at the time when Dawah first started. And so when the Prophet ﷺ came with the Qur'an, the Quraysh just didn't know how to handle it. So they went to the expert Arabicist at the time, the chief poet, the man who was, by all accounts, accepted to be the foremost authority on poetry and the Arabic language, and asked Al-Walid, Khalid's dad, what do you make of this? We can't understand how to deal with this new revelation, because there's obviously something different. And then the famous story which Allah mentions in the Qur'an, that Walid, he was pacing hither and thither and trying to come up with some way of countering the propaganda, or countering Islam with some form of counter propaganda. And then after 2 or 3 days, all he could come up with saying, this is it is a special type of magic. But he was renowned as the best of the poets. Here you've got Kaab ibn Zuhayr, who is known to be at that level, if not higher than that level. So he was one of the most famous poets of all of Arabia. And he comes from a sort of distinguished line of eminent poets. And he had this famous poet, made this famous poem, Banatul Su'ad, which a lot of the Arabs apparently they know. And he was when Makkah was conquered, he fled, and he knew that all of his counter propaganda against the Muslims in Islam would harm him. And then his own brother wrote him a letter to say basically either leave Islam, either leave Makkah or become a Muslim, because the Prophet ﷺ, he's waged war against these propagandists, these chief poets, these people who were instrumental in spreading lies against the Muslims and Islam. And we talked about the people that were on the blacklist when the Prophet ﷺ entered Makkah and the conquest of Makkah, and the people on the blacklist essentially there either for becoming murtad, leaving Islam and going back to idol worship, or for being, part of the propaganda wing against the Muslims, being the chief poets, being the chief communications officers who were there, whose job it is to lie and spin against the Prophet ﷺ. So these were the people that were on the list. And so Kaab ibn Zuhayr's brother said, look, you haven't got many choices. Either you get out of town and you stay out. The Prophet ﷺ is not going to come, dispatch people to assassinate. Just get out of town, or you become a Muslim. So it said that he went and then he got another letter from his brother, and then he thought about Islam, and he then basically decided to become a Muslim, and so he then comes back to see the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet doesn't recognize him, doesn't know what he looks like, and he's sort of wrapped up, and he comes and sits in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and he essentially says, basically he hints that he is sent by Kaab ibn Zuhayr. Says, look, if Kaab ibn Zuhayr comes to you and asks for forgiveness and to embrace Islam, what would you say to him? And the Prophet says, well, if he comes, then I'll accept his Islam. And then he goes, well, I am Kaab. So again, he's sort of hedging his bets. He's not openly declaring, because he doesn't know which way it's going to go. And so he goes, I am Kaab, to the Prophet, and says, okay, fine, tell me your story. Tells him his story and says, if you give me permission, I would like to, read a poem for you. And so he's, pre-prepared this poem, and I mean, it's written in the books of Seerah. It's a very long, dramatic poem, and it praises the Prophet ﷺ, and one of the phrases in it is that the Prophet ﷺ is like a light to the people. Now, is a light that the people seek, and he is like an Indian sword. And it was sort of known at the time that some of the best steelsmiths were the Indians. So their art of sword making, much like we recognize now that the Japanese samurai sword was technologically really advanced for its time, at the time amongst the Arabs, they recognized that the Indian sword was one of the technologically advanced superior swords, and so he's saying, he's comparing the Prophet ﷺ to an Indian sword, bright, shining, robust, peace. And the Prophet when Kaab finished the poem, the Prophet he asks the Sahabi to come and listen to it, and then he also takes off his own cloak and wraps it around Kaab. And this is and we talked about this before, this is recognized as the highest praise that a poet would achieve. They're not in it for the money. They're not in it for wealth or the prizes like that. They're in it for the love of their poetry. And when the chief, the most powerful person, the head of state, if he gives you his cloak, it's like that's it. That is the highest achievement you could have. It's it's more than getting a medal from the Queen, or it's more than getting a medal from the president. This is the ultimate achievement, is if the head of state, the chief, gives his own cloak, and the Prophet took his Burdah, his cloak, and gave it to Kaab. And obviously this was very treasured, and then Kaab, he used his poetry for the in promotion of Islam, and to counteract the negative stuff that he'd done previously. And then the next thing is that the Prophet ﷺ, he's now leaving and he's going back to Medina. But before he goes to Medina, he camps at Ji'rana, and we talked about Ji'rana before because that's the place where the Muslims kept the war booty. So before they they distributed the stuff from the Hawazin, they kept it in the valley of Ji'rana. And the Prophet, he then went, camped at Ji'rana, and then he put on his ihram, ready for Umrah. And this then is in reward terms, this is the third Umrah the Prophet did. So the first Umrah that the Prophet got reward for was at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So the Prophet, he's expelled from, or he leaves Makkah, does the Hijrah, and he goes to Medina, settles in Medina. And then you've got battle after battle after battle, Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, Azhab, all of these things. And then it culminates in, then the Prophet, he then tried to outmaneuver the Quraysh by announcing he's going to go for Umrah. This was a challenge to the Quraysh, and we talked about how the Quraysh did not want the Prophet to come and do Umrah, so they dispatched Khalid bin Walid to stop him. The Prophet dodged that. Then they dispatched Suhail bin Amr to negotiate with him, and then they negotiated the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Prophet cannot come and do Umrah because that is just utter humiliation for the Quraysh that year. So he's allowed to come the year after. They'll empty the city. He can do Umrah then. So the Prophet, he made the full intention to do Umrah. He was in his ihram. They took all their sacrificial animals, and they were prevented from Umrah at Hudaybiyah. So the Prophet gets reward for that Umrah, although he technically didn't do the rites of Umrah. And then, then they went back. So that's the first Umrah. And then the actual first physical Umrah he did, or the second Umrah in reward, was Umrah al-Qada, which was the year after. So that was the agreement of Hudaybiyah, is that don't come this year, come the next year, we'll keep the city empty. And so that was the first time he physically did the Umrah. And then this is the second physical Umrah, or the third in reward Umrah, is now where he's, after Hunain, He's camped in Ji'rana, and he's going back to Medina, and now he performs Umrah. When he conquered when he conquered Makkah, he was in his military gear, so he didn't do Umrah on entering then. And then for those 19 or so days whilst he was in Makkah, he did lots of tawafs. And he would do a tawaf every day, and he would do multiple tawafs daily. But he didn't do an Umrah. And so now he's gone out and he's come back, and he's performing his Umrah. And again, a lot of the scholars therefore say that it's not wrong, but it's discouraged to do multiple Umrahs every time you visit Makkah. And again, the situation was slightly different for people there at the time who were in and around the same area. But for us, when we're traveling such a long way and going to Makkah, it is a big deal, and we still, appreciate the sanctity and the importance of Umrah. Whereas if you basically do 2 Umrahs a week, then you'll get rewarded for it, but may not be as meaningful for you as a ritual as if you really focus on it. But anyway, so the Prophet did Umrah here, and then his final Umrah he did when he did the Hajj. So that's the next time he enters Makkah is Hajjatul Wada, and he combined the Hajj with Umrah, and he did Hajj al-Qiran, and there are and so the different rules if you combine your Hajj and Umrah in one ihram, or you do them in as separate. But the Prophet that was his fourth Umrah, as it were, or the third physical one was during the Hajj. So and there's not much else recorded. He did the Umrah, and then he goes back, and then as he's going back, he appoints Adi bin Usayd as governor of Makkah. So again, this is quite a number of weeks after conquering. He stabilized Makkah, and he's appointed a governor in the sort of principality of Makkah to rule over there. And to look after the affairs. Then it said that he got back to Medina in the last 6 nights of Dhul Qadar in the 8th year of Hijrah, and one of the Sahabi said, Muhammad al-Ghazali said, what a great change between the victorious period of Muhammad at present, which Allah has towered with manifest conquest, and that period of the past when Muhammad first arrived in this town 8 years ago. So you can see there's a stark contrast of status in the Prophet ﷺ when he first entered during the Hijrah, essentially as a refugee, leaving Makkah, and then the people who'd given him allegiance, surrounding Medina, and then him entering essentially in a sort of a quasi coup d'etat, and now he's entering as conqueror of Makkah 8 years later, and the contrast was just really stark. And powerful, and that's a comment that somebody made at the time. Then there's lots of, during that time, there's lots of other missions and platoons that the Prophet dispatched to pacify some of the surrounding tribes, get rid of a lot of the other major pagan temples and idols that were being worshipped, because he cleared the area around Makkah, and we talked about how they would dispatch little platoons and just destroy some of those temples, and now back to Medina, and he's dispatching lots of other people. Then there's one particular story where the Prophet he dispatched Ali ibn Abi Talib to demolish al-Qullus, which was another big idol. And this idol belonged to the Taiy tribe. And this was, it said in some say it was in Rabi' Awwal in the 9th year of Hijrah. And Prophet dispatched the Prophet dispatched Ali with 150 men, and 100 of them were on camels, and the other 50 on horseback. And it said he held a black flag with a white banner. Now, the most famous person of al-Taiy was known amongst all of the Arabs of Arabia, and his name was Hatim al-Taiy, right? And in the times before Islam, Hatim al-Taiy, who was the chief, he was known as being the most generous person amongst all the Arabs, and his generosity was legend. And we talked many years ago now about Abdul Muttalib, how he sacrificed, you know, so many. Wasn't Abdul Muttalib? Was it, or was it one of his ancestors? That they sacrificed or Hashim, they sacrificed so many animals that even the birds and all the wild creatures were feasting off them. So you know, there was, you know, and that became sort of some folklore. But here you had Hatim al-Taiy being known as the most generous of all the Arabs. So anyone who would come and meet Hatim, he would be essentially treated like a king. He would be lavished upon, and Hatim, you know, he gained this reputation of being the best host of all of Arabia, and there was no one that was more generous than Hatim, and you know, he carried that reputation. Obviously, his tribe benefited from that reputation as well, because he was known as the leader of the tribe, and then the tribe takes on some of that sort of shine, you know, because of Hatim al-Taiy. Now, Hatim al-Taiy had a son, Adi ibn Hatim, Adi, the son of Hatim, and he was now, you know, his father died, he was now in charge. Ali ibn Abi Talib, he's coming to destroy demolish al-Qullus. So what Adi does as chief is he hears that Ali ibn Abi Talib is coming, so he's got two choices essentially: put up a fight. Well, he's got three choices: put up a fight, become a Muslim, or flee. And so he basically wraps up all his belongings, takes all his wealth, and he flees, and he goes up north towards Sham. And he's, you know, he's a Christian, and he's got lots of Roman friends, and so he leaves town. He scarpers as the Muslims are approaching, and so the Muslims, they raided Mahallat Hatim, and they demolished the idol, and then they had you know, filled their you know, wagons with the spoils, and lots of camels and sheep, and they took lots of prisoners. And one of the prisoners was the sister of Hatim, Adi ibn Hatim, rather. One of the other narrations is that they find within the safe of Al-Qullus, the temple, 3 really plush swords and lots of three armors. And so they distributed a lot of the other spoils amongst the army, the 150, but they kept these best things to be presented as you know, as booty for the Prophet ﷺ, spoils. And so they bring all the captives and the spoils to Medina, and then the sister of Adi ibn Hatim, the daughter of Hatim, she begs for an audience with the Prophet ﷺ. And so she's there, and again, you see this amongst people who have this noble upbringing, that they have this noble upbringing, they know that they are the sons or daughters of noble people, and they have that sense of pride, some would say arrogance about them, or that what we would say is self-confidence, where they're able to say, look, I need to see the chief. Just your ordinary person wouldn't have the audacity to say, give me an audience with the prophet or your chief or the king or the emperor. Whereas these people, and we saw this with, Juwayriya, the Prophet who later married, she came to the Prophet and said, look, I am the daughter of the chieftain. Look at my, place now. I'm a slave now. Can you arrange for me to buy me out from, servitude? And the Prophet says, what if I give you something better? What if I offer, propose marriage? But she had that confidence inside her to go to the Prophet and demand that. Here you've got, again, people of that stock having the confidence to say, I want to see the Messenger of Allah. And so she goes there, and she goes and sees she sees the Prophet and says, basically, O Messenger of Allah, my brother is absent, he's gone. My father is dead, and I'm too old to be any real use to you. So be gracious with me, so that Allah may be bountiful to you. So again, she's saying, look, treat me nicely, so Allah will treat you nicely. And then so the Prophet says, well, who are you? Who's your brother? You've come in, you're sort of being a bit uppity, and he says, so, who's your brother? I don't know you from Adam. She goes, well, my brother, it is Adi ibn Hatim. And the Prophet says, okay, well, isn't he the one who fled from Allah and his messenger? And then she goes, yes. And the Prophet just walked away. So then she came back the next day and said the same thing, have mercy on me so Allah can have mercy on you. And she got the same answer. And then she came the third day, and it's narrated that there was a person beside the Prophet who she thought was Ali ibn Abi Talib. She's before asking the same thing, that person who she thought was Ali said to her, why don't you ask from him an animal to ride on? And so she said the same thing, and then she said, can I have an animal to ride on? And the Prophet, he granted her request. And again, the Prophet, he's a supreme politician. He knows that this is the sister of the chief who's fled, and so he's treating her with due respect. And then so fine, you want a camel or a horse? Here you go, take it. So she takes it. And then she rides up north and finds out where her brother has been hiding in sort of the court of one of their Christian kings. She goes and she meets him, and she tells him off. She says, why did you flee and leave me alone? What type of man are you? And then she goes, well, why don't you go back to Muhammad and have a conversation with him? And he goes, well, why should I? Because look, and this is a really cutting thing that she said to Adi, is that the Messenger of Allah has done me such a noble deed that your father would never have done. Therefore, willy-nilly, frightened or secure, you should go and see him. So again, she's saying, look, your dad was known as the most generous person in all of Arabia. Yet he would not have done what the Prophet did to me, right? He didn't need to, but he gave me a horse and he freed me and let me come here. Would your dad have done something like that? So, and then she said, look, either he is a prophet or he's a king. Either way, if he's a prophet, you might as well convert and follow him. If you're a Christian, you might as well convert and follow him. If he's a king, well, you might as well go to him and win some favor. So again, it's a very material political calculus to say, look, babe, what have you got to lose, right? Either you become a Muslim, or actually you curry favor with him, And, you know, if he's a king, then you can enter into some sort of alliance, and, you know, it's a win-win for you. And again, so she herself is thinking that he could be a prophet, or, along those lines. So then Hatim, he tells this story himself later on. I mean, he lived to be one of the longest surviving Sahabi, right? Adi ibn Hatim said that he lived till he was well over 100, maybe 110, 120. So he lived, years later, and then years, people, came to him years later to say, look, tell us the stories of how you became Muslim citizen and all this stuff, and so, he's recounting this story. This is in the first person singular. This is what happened to him. So he goes, then he left unsecured. So he's the chief of the tribe, and so he's always used to traveling with an entourage, with an elite guard, with protection, because he's the chief. He's the most important. But he's now persuaded by his sister to go, and he goes unprotected, and he enters into Medina and comes to meet the Prophet ﷺ. And Adi narrates himself that, there was, and again, we hear this phrase so much so. We had Safwan ibn Umayyah talk about it, a few weeks ago. There's no one more despised to me than the Prophet. But I said to myself, after my sister talked to me, that let me go speak to him, and if he's speaking the truth, then I shall listen to him directly, and if not, it shouldn't harm me, right? So then he enters into Medina, and he gets recognized because he's famous. He's Adi ibn Hatim, and there are people who recognize him. So they start gathering him around, and he knows he's, no one's going to harm him because he's got that reputation. And then he's brought in to meet the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ says, Ya Adi, accept Islam and be safe. Right? And Adi goes, I've already got a good religion. I'm not a polytheist. I'm not an idol worshipper. I'm already a good religionist. I'm a Christian, right? So he has that psychological superiority that he doesn't want to be seen as a normal Arab, which is again why he went up to the Christian north. So the Prophet ﷺ then took him by his hand and took him to his house. And Adi says, as I'm going to the Prophet ﷺ's house, they meet an old lady, and then she stops him and asks the Prophet ﷺ for something. And the Prophet ﷺ, he's still holding Adi's hand, and then he tends to whatever she's saying, sorts it out, and then carries on walking. And then he gets stopped by someone else, another older person, who asks the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ called someone and gets that sorted out, and then that person's on his way. And then Adi's thinking to himself, the Prophet ﷺ knows who I am, yet he's and so in normal discourse and sort of etiquette, Adi ibn Hatim, he will be treated as the most important person in town, the VIP. Yet he's saying, look, the Prophet ﷺ, he's got me by his hand, and I'm walking to his house. He knows I'm a VVIP, yet he still makes time to sort out the problems of these other ordinary people he would consider peasants. And that sort of, it blows his mind. And he's sort of starting to realize there, he's no ordinary king. This is something different about him. So, and he's saying, look, if this man is not a king, for him to stop when he has me, then he mustn't be a king, and then perhaps he is a prophet. And then he goes, we arrived at the Prophet's house, and this bit is really, really beautiful as well. The Prophet, he brings Adi into his house, right? And there's there's a bit, and Adi said, look, there was nothing there. There was an old, worn-out mat. That's the only furniture there was. The Prophet takes out that worn-out mat, puts it in front of Adi, and tells Adi, sit. And Adi felt embarrassed. He said, look, I can't sit on it. This is the only piece of furniture. There's nothing else there. And the Prophet has to sit on the sand. Again, there's no carpet, just sand. This is the house of the Prophet. And he goes, I'm too embarrassed to do that. And the Prophet said, no. Ali said, look, can you sit on it? And the Prophet said, no, I'd rather you sit on it. You are the guest. And so the Prophet insisted. So Adi sat there, and he sat on the mat, and the Prophet sat on the sand. And again, this is, for someone like Adi, this is mind-blowing. Somebody who is leader, commander-in-chief, with the reputation he has. He's just conquered Makkah, right? And he's conquered his own town. And this is how he treats himself and treats other guests. So the Prophet took him by the hand, and he's direct with Adi. And he goes, what makes you flee? Did you flee because you don't believe that in one Allah? Or did you not know that there is no other God than Allah? Now Adi goes, no, that's not the reason. And then the Messenger of Allah went on, certainly you flee so that you may not hear the statement saying, Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. Do you know of anyone other than Allah, or anyone who is greater than Allah? And Adi says, no. And then the Prophet said, look, the Jews are those whose portion is wrath, and the Christians are those who have gone astray. I'm a Muslim, and I believe in one Allah. And the Prophet, he's just been really frank with Adi. And there's no we're all on the same path, bit of you, bit of me, we're all going to meet in the same place, right? There's no interfaith dialogue, sort of tiptoeing that you see in some of these interfaith dialogues. It's basically straight out and saying, I'm on the right path, you're on the wrong path, right? And he goes, maybe you're not accepting Islam because of the state of the people around me. And he's basically saying, look, perhaps you're hesitant because you look at us and you think we're poor and we're not educated and we're politically weak, right? And you're used to living a life of luxury. Is that the reason? And Adi doesn't know what to say, but obviously it's playing on his mind that, that they have these negative connotations about the Muslims. And so the Prophet he then addresses those aspects. Look, have you heard of Al-Hira, which is like one of the most southernmost point of the Arabian Peninsula in the Yemen? And he goes, look, verily, it's only a matter of time before a lady will leave Al-Hira, wanting to do tawaf in Makkah, leaving Al-Hira and traveling by herself without anyone to protect her, and she will only be scared of the wolves or the flock for her flock, right? And again, it's basically saying, look, if you think that there's political instability, I guarantee we're going to have peace, so much peace that a woman, and again, this is unthinkable for a woman to even travel outside the city. In those days, this is a woman would travel unprotected and not fear anyone, right? And come all the way to Makkah, do tawaf, and go back. And that's how much peace and security we will live in. And it's only a matter of time before the treasures of Hisra, the Persian emperor, will be distributed amongst us. And then Adi says, Hisra ibn Hormuz, Kisra, the son of Hormuz, are you sure? I mean, this is like, saying, the wealth of, Washington will be distributed amongst the people here. We will, there's no way you will overturn the Persian Empire. And the Prophet says, yes, Hisra ibn Hormuz. And it's only a matter of time before a person will go around the streets of Medina asking for someone to take sadaqah and will not find a single person to take it. We will be so rich that, there will be nobody who will be willing to accept any sadaqah or zakah. And then Adi's, said, that, he has seen two of these three things come true: the peace and the security, and he was in the army that conquered the Persian Empire. And then again, within a generation, you had, I think, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, one of the Umayyad Caliphs. It's well known there was a time when the treasury could not, give a zakat to anyone. They couldn't find anyone to give sadaqah to. And again, we know about this in the time of some of the Uthmani Caliphs, where they would just hang the sadaqah on trees, in the Ottoman Empire, to say, whoever is poor, just take this, right? Because I can't find anyone, poor enough to give it. And then the Prophet he addresses Adi and says, look, embrace Islam and you will be secure. And he goes, look, I'm a man of religion. And he goes, well, and Prophet says, look, I know your religion better than you, right? And he goes, do you really know my religion better than me? He goes, yes, I do. Do you don't you take a quarter of the wealth of your people for yourself? And then Adi embarrassingly says, yes, I do. And then Prophet says, this is unlawful in your religion to do such a thing. And the Prophet, when he said that, Adi said, as soon as he said that, I immediately became a Muslim, because I realized that only, he must be a prophet, and only he would know something like that, right? So then, he became a Muslim there. So quickly finish off, last couple of minutes, apologies to be overrun as well. But just to look at at how humble and the humility of the Prophet ﷺ, when he's discussing with Adi, right? And taking him, he understands him, and it just shows him, who he really is. And Adi just spending half an hour with the Prophet ﷺ recognizes the truth in that, and that this man is not in it for worldly gain. He's not in it for power. He's not in it for fame. He's the real deal. And then he takes him as the real deal. And again, when you meet people, it's clear you need to work out who are the people who are the real deals and who are the blaggers, who are the hustlers. And he recognized, with his upbringing and his ability to judge, because he comes from that noble stock. He knows that. The other thing is that the Prophet, he doesn't walk on eggshells when he's talking to Adi. It's not a question of we all on the same path, we're all going to get to heaven, but maybe you should consider. And that the Prophet, he was direct. He criticized the theology of the other religion, right? It's not a question of where all religions are valid. It's like, no, you're wrong. And these are the reasons you're wrong, and you need to follow my way. And again, that's something that we need to learn and appreciate. And when we do our dawah, use that with hikmah in the right occasions, right? It's not always be confrontational, but know that and sometimes we need to be direct and to be proud of the fact that we know we have the right on our side, and we want to share that with other people and not be embarrassed about what we have. And that's really important. Again, that there is a trend nowadays for this type of playing down Islam or deregulating Islam to the level where it is just seen as another religion comparable with the other religions. But no, it's a superior religion, and we need to accept that, believe that, and promulgate that. The final thing, while we're talking about Adi, which is again, it is one of the most important things to learn from today's session, is Adi ibn Hatim. His father, was well known for what he did. So Adi, he visits the Prophet ﷺ, visits him lots of times. On one occasion, he's got this thing burning in the back of his mind. And he goes, Ya Rasulullah, my father used to be good with his relatives, and he was generous with the people. He did that and he did that. Will he be rewarded? So it's, you know, and we talked about this 3-4 years ago on another occasion. But so Ati is saying, what's going to happen to my dad? Is he a good person or not? Will he get rewarded for doing this good, right? And you know, as we said, he had a legend of being the uber most hospitable person in the world amongst the Arabs, and the Arabs were very hospitable generally. And then the Prophet, he replied in a fantastic way, and there's a lot we can learn from this. And the Prophet says, your father desired something and he got what he desired, right? So your father was doing the stuff, being hospitable, being generous. He did it for a reason, and he got the reward of that reason. And he didn't presume to tell him what that was, but it's understood. If he did it for the sake of Allah, if he did this generosity for the sake of Allah, then obviously Allah will reward him. And we see people now who do lots of good deeds, you know, whether they're study circles, whether it's charities, whether they're helping the homeless, whether it's raising funds for this, that, and the other. They do lots of, on the surface, good deeds. But who are they doing it for? What are they doing it for? Every action is judged according to its intention, right? And so you will get what you deserve. If you, whoever strives, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever strives, whoever wants the akhirah and strives for it whilst he's a believer, that is the one, his reward will be given to him. So it's careful what we do and why we do it. And we know lots of people around us who do good deeds, whether they're Muslims or Christians or other religionists or a-religionists, who do what on the surface, on superficially, are good, wholesome deeds. But they, you know, but don't expect Allah to reward them for things that they do for different reasons. If you do it for the sake of Allah, then Allah has every right and an obligation to reward you for that. If you do it for another reason, then go to that other reason for the reward on the Day of Judgment. So we'll finish there, inshallah. So, Jazakallah khair. Thanks for that. Do remember us and the Ummah in your du'as. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.